My name is Joe Prim, and I am the host of Prepare.Defend.Lead. In this episode, I will be talking about communication, and then I'll do some updates on the PDL Budget Overland Project, the Homestead, and how that's coming along, and the book that I have been working on for what seems like forever. So we got some good news on that front, but I will talk about communication first for those that don't care about the updates. If that sounds interesting, stick around. I'll catch you on the other side of the intro.
The comfort and distractions of today collide to indulge our desires and provide a slow death by apathy. A superior primitive ethos exists. Prepare for tomorrow. Defend what you value and lead those you love. This mindset is the foundation of living an authentic life as a bold, disciplined man resolute in your mission. Prepare, defend, lead. Your mission. Own it.
All right, here we go with yet another episode of PDL. Thank you for coming along for the ride. I hope that you get something out of this episode. If this is your first time listening, welcome. Please be sure to check out the past episodes. If you have been around for a while and are coming back for more, thank you very much. It is very cool to be able to put out a podcast like this and have people listen to it and share it. And if you would like this mission to continue and this podcast to continue moving forward and expanding and growing, I'm just going to ask you to do a couple things for me. I know it's a big ask, especially since you're probably in the middle of doing something else right now as you listen to this podcast, but I would greatly appreciate it if you would take just a couple minutes and review this podcast on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to this podcast. Share it with a friend. Find a link. Just send the link their way on a text message. And if you would subscribe, that way I make sure that you don't miss any episodes and we stay up to date on what is going on. You can always go to Prepare.Defend.Lead.com, and from there you can download episodes. There's a link right there to go to the Spreaker homepage of Prepare.Defend.Lead, and from there there's a bunch of links for every different place that you can download Prepare.Defend.Lead. So please give that a look. If you'd like to support the podcast, you can also at Prepare.Defend.Lead buy some swag, t-shirts, and stickers to rep the brand and rep the mission. So again, thanks for listening. Those who have been listening for a while may have some interest in what's going on with the Homestead as we move forward on that project and what's going on with the PDL Budget Overland Project and how that's moving forward. And some of you may even be interested in what's going on with this book that I've been talking about for a long time, and all it seems like I do is talk about it and haven't produced much, but we got some good updates on that as well. But I'll save that for the end because I really want to start this out by talking about communication. As in my day-to-day dealings with so many different people in my line of work right now, what I am seeing and what's actually kind of alarming to me is so little emphasis put on communication, and when you are communicating, the lack of connection that's made with communication. But before I go anywhere with this topic, I want to make one thing very clear. I am an introvert. Until recently, the last few years, I have paid absolutely no attention whatsoever to the art of communication or ever would have thought of doing a podcast on needing to learn the soft skill of communication and how invaluable it is, especially right now where it seems to be so lacking. You can really make yourself stand out from everybody else by simply learning to communicate. again, for me, as being an introvert, talking on the phone to people, meeting new people, having conversations or meetings, for me, are one of the things that I hate more than anything else. I absolutely hate that stuff. But to the people that I communicate with on a regular basis would never think that of me, because I spend a lot of time working on this, because I know how important it is, and I know that for such a long time I paid no attention to it, and having no natural abilities or gifts in communicating with people, it has been something that I have had to put a lot of extra effort into. To the point where before I make phone calls, I'll walk through conversations in my mind. I'll jot down notes of what I want to talk about to make sure that I don't miss things, any of the important topics that need to be brought up during that phone conversation or even a face-to-face conversation. Because I am such an introvert and because I really dislike talking so much, because of that, I've had to learn some tricks, and I've had to work extra hard to get to the point where even doing this podcast is something that I can do on a regular basis. So with that said, some of you out there that are listening to this naturally have the gift of gab, naturally love to meet new people, naturally are very outgoing and ask a lot of questions. But this is what I'm going to say about that. We live in a very strange time right now. There are a lot of consequences to COVID, whether you believe in COVID as being what it is, or whether you don't believe that it's what people say it is. No matter which end of the spectrum really you fall into, we are all experiencing consequences from COVID. And I'm going to get into those real quick. But what I foresee coming, and others that I listen to and articles that I read, is that there is a lot of turnover coming. I believe the statistics were up to 44% of people that were polled believe that within the next 6 months they will be looking for another job or working for another company. That is a tremendous amount of people that you are going to work with every day, and maybe you're one of them that does not want to be where they are any longer. And I believe a big part of that is because of these consequences, and we'll get into that. But the other part of that equation is leadership. Leaders are not paying attention to their most valuable asset, which is you or your coworkers, or perhaps you're in that leadership position and you're not paying attention correctly to your most valuable asset. And people are getting caught up because of the economy and because of the unknown and because of the fear that's driving so many people have gotten caught up in the bottom line. And because of that, there are going to be some tremendous consequences coming as we move forward, simply because people don't feel valued where they're at. People don't feel that they matter. And these things can be remedied by communication. A big part of this, too, as we talk about preparedness a lot on this podcast and leadership, is this is the art of building relationships and building human capital. It's one thing to build up capital in the bank or capital on your farm or homestead. It's a completely other animal to be building up human capital. Human capital can have amazing benefits to it, but it takes time to cultivate and takes effort and empathy and an expense of energy and time in order to build this capital. So some of the consequences of COVID are Zoom calls. So many companies have gone to strictly Zoom calls or a lot of Zoom meetings on a regular basis to keep tabs on their employees and make sure that people are keeping up to date on their tasks. But the problem there is, again, as everybody knows, a large percentage, I believe more than 50% of our communication human to human is not the words that are coming out of our mouth, but our body language. In reading body language, eye contact, hand gestures, things like that go a long way towards really communicating how we feel about things. Tone, things like that, where many of those things are lost on Zoom meetings. And from my experience, there's a lot of disorganization to Zoom meetings because there is not a leader there standing in front of the meeting directing people in the same way. Because of that, there's a lot of meandering, a lot of babbling, a lot of wasted time and energy. And I believe because of that, there is not just the time that's lost, but also the communication of your topics, of what you're talking about, of what you need, of what your desires are lost through these Zoom meetings. Another consequence of COVID is wearing these masks and losing out on seeing smiling faces, on losing out on the communication of people's faces. You know, from a very, very young age, we learn to read people's faces before we learn to understand the words that are coming out of their mouth. So, as human beings, when we lose that type of contact with people, we lose part of our communication, part of our understanding, part of our connection with one another as humans. Another consequence of COVID and communication would be distance. Many people have not been able to see family, have stayed in their homes, and there's a distance there. People have not been flying across the country for business trips. People have not been going into the office. So there's a distance there. Again, because of this distance, there's a lack of human connection there. Another consequence is simply escape. So many people have been trapped in their homes, whether they've been trapped there because of government ordinances or whether they've been trapped in their own homes because of their fear. People have been trapped. People have not been able to escape their homes and escape onto vacations, escape to the park, escape in the way that they normally would. And because of that, we've seen a tremendous surge in suicides and depression medicines and other addictions because people have just not been able to escape. They've been trapped in by themselves or trapped in a small space and not had the freedom that they would have normally had. Another consequence would be time with friends. And why time with friends is so much different is with your friends, there should be an understanding. There should be some empathy. There's a different level of communication with your coworkers that you're meeting with in the Zoom meetings and with your friend meeting for lunch or for a coffee or for a picnic or for a kid's play date, right? It's a different sort of communication. It's more relaxed, but there's some understanding there. There's some connection there. And along with time with friends would also be family, right? Seen a lot of people missing out on time with extended family. But even as we're experiencing these consequences of COVID, I believe in reality we're sort of regressing as human beings in our ability to speak to one another and to communicate. We've become very heavily reliant on email and on text messaging. I heard an interesting story, and at some point maybe I can look up exactly where it came from, but it came about in early civilization is they were considering adopting an alphabet and written letter and being able to write letters to one another over great distances to, in the future, perhaps write books or memoirs. And they were walking together. It was a couple of very well-known people. I should have looked this up before the podcast. But as they were walking and conversing and talking about what would be the consequences of the advent of the alphabet and written letter and communication over long distances versus what they were doing in that very moment. And they realized even then that there would be massive consequences to human connection and in conversation and in parlay of thoughts and ideas over a great distance versus face-to-face. And this is one of the problems right then with email. Somebody throws out a question or a comment or something, right? And then we wait for the response. And then you get the response, you read through the response, you hope that you understand what that response was, and then again you throw out another question or a comment or try to make sure that you completely understand that response. So there's a hesitation, there's time in between getting that response. Very disconnected, we'll just say. And then it's the same with text messages. And text messages even tend to be shorter. And the way that I look at the emojis, which have become much more popular, right? Started out as kind of something that, very young people were using to kind of communicate emotion along with the text in their text because there's no emotion to the words that you're typing. But the reality is, I don't believe that there's much of a difference between emojis and hieroglyphics. Right? There's very, very little difference between what people used before there was an alphabet to communicate with one another, to tell stories on a cave wall or in the dirt by drawing pictures, and what we're doing now. So I think we need to be very careful in how we use these things, and this is why learning to really communicate with one another is something that we all need to be putting a lot of effort into. Because as everybody adopts these Zoom calls and email and text messages and things of that nature, and they become more commonplace, the better you are at communicating, the better you are at building relationships, the better you are at building rapport with different people from different places, the more likely that you are to put yourself in a position to not only survive, but to thrive in the world as it moves forward. To not become part of the status quo that sends out emails and text messages void of any sort of emotion, but the person that people build relationships with. Because through the difficulties that are on the horizon, right? And I like to use that because there's always difficulties on the horizon. We might not know what they are. Some of us may think we know what they are. Maybe we're right. Maybe you're wrong. We'll have to wait and find out, right? That's the only way that we will know. But I guarantee you that in your life and in the lives of some of the people that you know, there are difficulties on the horizon. And that's where that human capital comes in. That's where that building that relationship and why it is so important. And one thing that I have learned is I venture into this understanding of communication and building relationships is that there is no hack for building relationships. They take time. They take energy. They take a sort of vulnerability. But the value of them is invaluable, we'll say. I don't believe that you can put a value on true friendship, especially these days when so few people truly understand what that means or are willing to make the sacrifices, which are minimal, to make that happen. So I want to go over a few different ideas and pointers that I came up with for communicating better, but not only communicating better, but really putting an emphasis on building relationships and on building that rapport. Number one, over-communicate. What do I mean by that? Whether by email or by text message or face-to-face communications, over-communicate. Don't try to simplify things. I catch myself often as I'm typing out an email to use phrases like they or them or their. And what I've started doing recently in order to make sure that things are as clear as they possibly can be is to replace those thems with people's full names or with the name of a company, and to replace the theirs with specific locations, so that when an email is received, there is no question about where you're talking about, of a confusion between one project or another project, or one team versus another team, that things are as clear as possible. With over-communication, it's also when face-to-face, when giving instruction to other people. It's very easy to give instruction the way that you would understand it. And maybe you have much more time in a business or an industry or with a company than the people that you're trying to communicate something to. So you take for granted that they understand. And oftentimes, when that's the case, we err towards giving a little bit less information because we feel that we may offend somebody if we oversimplify or overcommunicate things. What I have realized is that it is very rare that you are going to offend somebody by giving them too much information. It is very rare that you are going to get somebody upset with you because you explained things too clearly. Now, as part of over-communication as well, I believe that if you communicate your instructions and you walk through, whether for me, maybe a set of blueprints or some instructions on how something is to be installed or assembled, and then ask, do you get that? Does that make sense to you? Do you have a better way, or what were you thinking? Allow them an opportunity by asking a question to communicate back to you their understanding or their ideas. As a leader, it's always very important to make sure that you allow those other people, to those that are working for you or those that are in positions below you as the leader, to have their say, have their ideas, and contribute themselves to what you're saying. But we'll get back to what it's about. It's about over-communicating your ideas, your instructions, as much as possible. Put the information there. Does that mean make your email 5 times longer? Nope. The shorter the email, the better. But the more information that you can fit into that short email, that's the key. Is it going to take some practice? For me, sure does. Respond in good time to text messages, to emails, and to phone calls. We do that out of respect. I say in good time because sometimes you're out with your family, or it's the end of the day of work, and you know that the phone call's not that important. You can take care of it in the morning and still be respectful. Part of doing that is, I believe that you need to build some boundaries between your family time, your personal time, and what's going on with work, or even a lot of times what's going on with friends or family. but you need to get back to and to respond to people in a good time, in a timely manner, out of respect. Ask what you can do for other people. I do that regularly. I almost end all my phone conversations and all my conversations, hey, if you need anything, let me know. If there's a way that I can help you out with this, let me know. If you need something, let me know, and I'll do what I can to help you out. Now, when we had that freak cold streak came through down here in Texas, I used that as an opportunity to get in touch with a lot of different people, whether it was our neighbors or whether it was people that I work with on a regular basis, to check in on them. How are you? Is there something that I can do to help you? Put yourself in that position to give to others in perhaps their time of need. Another one here is simply ask how other people are doing. Rather than jump on somebody for showing up late for work or for missing a day of work, ask how they are. You don't know what's going on in somebody else's life unless you ask, or you have a good enough relationship with them that they're going to tell you. Ask how people are. Like I said, this turnover that is coming, that is upon us, is 44% of people that are working in one place say they're going to work someplace else. A big part of that is because people feel undervalued. And a big part of that is because of this distance and these consequences of COVID. But nonetheless, these consequences can be mitigated by simply asking how somebody is. How are you? The way that I like to do this is if I know that there's a holiday upcoming, like spring break this week, hey, do you have any plans for spring break? Next week I'll ask people, I'll start out conversations by, hey, did you do anything for spring break last week? In fact, a lot of times I'll show up to a project and people will right away want to start talking about the job, and I'll say, hey, first things first, how was your weekend? Did you do anything cool? Allow people to share what's going on in their life. Show some interest in who they are, in what they like, in what their children do, in where they like to go on vacation, and what their pastimes are, and what their hobbies are. You just never know where you may find something in common that is a great bond between you, but at the same time, you don't know where that conversation can lead to or where that relationship can lead to by simply asking people how they are or showing some interest in them, their hobbies, their family. So important, especially right now where people are not doing this, to show respect enough for people to ask how they are doing. As a part of that, it's important, I got on my list here, empathy. So it really seems to be a dying art right now, with everybody leaning and pushing so hard for the bottom line, with people pushing so hard to try to keep their jobs. On the back burner falls any sort of empathy. And showing some empathy, showing some concern, showing some understanding to people where they are at, the situation that they find themselves in or a family member of theirs finds themselves in, can go a very long way towards building relationship, towards building rapport with others. It's important to work to build up collateral with other people when times are good. Now, go back to, again, like I said, because there's always a storm on the horizon. So while things are going good, while people are working, while people are healthy, while people are doing well, build those relationships with them. I look to anybody that I meet, whether it's new or whether it's somebody that I've known for a while. Each time I go to talk to that person, I look at it as the potential to build a long-lasting friendship with that person. Now, sometimes very quickly it becomes obvious that this will never be a friendship. Sometimes down the line, it takes a while and you realize this will never be a friendship. But that doesn't mean that you can't do all these other things that we've been talking about or I've been talking about here, right? Doesn't make them any less important or that I would slow down on any of these things. But the reality is, you want to show empathy towards others because you may be able to help them, give them a little advice, push them in the right direction, and help them out. But the reality of it is, we are human as well. And there may be a time when you need help, whether it's looking for a new job or looking for a good mechanic or looking for some advice in an area, a financial advice or a good tax guy or whatever it might be, right? In the better relationship that you have with different people, the more likely they are going to be able to help you as well when you need to be helped. Now, should that be our key motivation, our key factor? No. But as human beings, we reciprocate and we give back to one another. There's a mutual understanding, and that's how we've really gotten to where we are as human beings, is by understanding that you give to me, when I get an opportunity, I'll give back to you. And I think that is a good thing, because we know then that we have other people that we can count on when we need help. And that is really important as well. And that is part of the human connection. That is part of human relationships. That is part of building rapport with other people. And my last thing here is, don't ask stupid questions. You know, we grow up being taught that there aren't stupid questions. And really, maybe there isn't. But as time goes on, I realize that I believe that there are stupid questions. If there are things that you can figure out, or you can look up, or you can look through the directions, or you can find an answer in a set of blueprints, then you do your due diligence before you ask the question. Is that always going to be the case? No, it's not. But be careful what questions you ask of other people, especially when they should be things that you know the answer to if you had paid attention. If you had paid attention, you would know the answer to that question. Then make sure that you clarify why you are asking that question. Hey, I wasn't listening, or I didn't catch what you said. Hey, is this what you wanted? Is this exactly how you want things done? Quantify it. Don't be afraid to admit that you missed something or you messed up. But when you come across and just ask questions for things that you should be able to do due diligence and find an answer to, it's very difficult to, in that position, make yourself sound like you're not a fool. So, just a little bit of other advice there on the side. That's all I'm going to do on communication. If you're interested in these other updates, stick around here, and I'm going to get a little bit into the book and the Homestead and the Overland Project. But those are my thoughts on communication. I really, as I move forward in the position that I'm in now, I am realizing more and more how important communication is. Not just in communicating direction and not just being thorough in my emails, but the importance of communicating in a way to build connection with others. And I don't know that you can put a value on that, and I don't know that many people are talking about that or reminding other people how important our human connection, how important empathy, how important relationships are. Right now, so many people are scrambling to get what they can get. And whether that be companies trying to make sure that they that their bottom line is taken care of, that their cash flow is where it needs to be, or whether that is other people that are trying to build up their small businesses or trying to build up whatever it is that they have going on, their ministry, whatever they want to call it that they have going on. The way that you communicate, the way that you present yourself, the questions that you ask, the responses that you make or don't make are what speaks volumes about who you are, what you believe, and what is important to you. You can have the best website. You can have be the most eloquent person. You can have the most stylish of clothes. You can have the best social media account. But if through your text messages, if through your emails, if through your phone messages, you do not convey the message that other people are important, you fail. You fail. It is so important to make sure that other people do not feel like they are being used, or that you want to use that other person as a step stool to get to where you want to go. It is so important to realize that you are judged on a daily basis by the words that come out of your mouth, by the way that you communicate, and the way that you communicates much more than we often realize. So be aware of how you're communicating, how your text messages come across, how your emails come across, how you come across when you're speaking to others, whether you care about them or you only care about your job, or you only care about your lawn, or you only care about your son and how he's progressing in sports or in his karate class, whatever it might be. The way you communicate is of utmost importance. So start to take note of how you communicate with others and tweak and make changes where you need to make changes. All right, enough about that. I hope I was able to communicate my thoughts on communication and get those ideas across to you guys. So as far as the homestead, boy, oh boy, we are getting to that point of I just want it to be done. Having been in construction for 25 years now or something, I understand fully how quickly things can get done when they need to get done. And at this point, in my opinion, things are just starting to drag beyond where they should drag. So, a little bit of frustration. Tomorrow I'm going out to the property to meet with the electric company to help them as they design up how many electric poles they need to get to get the electric from the road to our house. So that's an exciting step forward. The plumbers are supposed to be there this week doing the roughing of the plumbing, and the electric is done then. The plumbing is done. We're ready to start, hopefully, with insulation and getting the drywall started. So we're definitely can see the light at the end of the tunnel. It's fun to go out there and be able to go into our new house. The kids have both picked out which room is theirs, and they're designing and thinking through where their beds are going to be. So this is an excitement above and beyond anything that I have probably experienced in my life. To be in a position to have this house built and to be on that piece of property is a blessing beyond anything I would have ever expected. So coming down here to Texas was a big leap of faith, and the opportunity to start a second homestead down here in Texas is an unbelievable opportunity for us. We're all very excited about it, and that excitement starts to lead into a little bit of impatience, I think, at times. I'm looking forward to having a patio out back, and what my goal is, what my vision is to be able to record this podcast on video each week, to have the Texas hill country in the background, and being able to record this podcast so people can watch it on YouTube or whatever other platforms on video, or listen to the regular podcast. I think that would be so much fun and so cool to be able to share what's going on with us on the homestead, kind of right behind me as I record the podcast. That's my goal. That's my vision. That's what I'm thinking. That's kind of what's driving a lot of what's going on here. So that's exciting. This next couple weeks, I will start working on drawing up my plans for the property. I have a rough idea in my mind of what we want to do for future development. We will definitely start out on this Homestead 2.0 here, as we left our last homestead a couple years ago. We will start out different pace. I think a lot slower, a lot more methodical, and a lot more meaning behind each thing that we do. So I have in my mind already ideas of where a future barn would be, and where the animals would be to that. And the front will probably be mostly all fruit trees and fruit bushes. And hopefully, I talked to a friend this past week who's interested in maybe putting a hive on the back side of the property. So things are coming together. Ideas and plans are starting to gel as we look over this property. It will be interesting to see how things begin to grow again this spring. As early spring here in Texas, everything really changes from being dry. We get some rain, the wildflowers come out, and everything looks absolutely beautiful for a short amount of time, right? So that's our updates there. As far as the PDL Budget Overland Project. Now, just if you haven't listened in the past, the goal of this project, if you like overlanding, and for me, there are 3 qualifications of this whole project. Number 1, it is for recreation. I want to build a vehicle that we can take with us to go camping, that we can take on driving adventures, that we can go off-road adventures, that we can do some overlanding trips, things like that, to give us an opportunity to have a vehicle for recreational purposes. Number 2 is a creative outlet for me. I love to create. I love to work with my hands. So getting back into working on a vehicle and having grease under my fingernails and beat up knuckles has been a great joy to me. I forgot how much that I enjoy working on mechanical things and building my skills in this area. Most of what I have done so far is stuff that I have done in the past or similar to things I've done in the past. But we will start adventuring a little bit deeper into new things as we progress with this project. So the goal, and the third part of of that is recreation, creation, and the third part of it is to build a vehicle where we can leave where we are at our home, to flee something if we needed to, right? If wildfires or flooding or a tornado where our home was ruined, that we would be able to get away, get to a safe area, and evade the problem, right? The second part of that, the flip side of that, was that we would be able to get back into those areas in order to render help, give out water, medical aid, help transport other people. But the goal of the project then is to be able to haul and the equipment, food, my 2 children, and our dog for 7 days. That is the overall goal of this. Would be we could leave where we're at, load it up, and have the supplies and the room to accommodate my family, our dog, and the equipment for us to survive 7 days out of the vehicle. Now, if you know anything about overlanding and you go on YouTube or start looking at some cool websites like Expedition Portal, you're going to see a lot of very, very expensive rigs. Big, big, big money. $60,000, $80,000, $100,000 rigs that are absolutely beautiful. But as in, whether you're getting into fly fishing or hunting or smoking cigars even, there's a big money end of it, and I want to prove that anybody can get into this. So my goal with this project is to have a vehicle and have it set up for the goal, like I said, to accommodate me and my family and the equipment that we would need and food for 7 days. But also that we would be able to get that in under a budget of $10,000. So right now, the first phase of this project has been maintenance. I bought a 2003 Mitsubishi Montero with 144-ish thousand miles on it. Not a lot of miles. In absolutely beautiful condition. Body is beautiful. Interior beautiful. But obviously, a vehicle of that age, there's some maintenance concerns. So I spent a lot of time investigating and reading on the forums as far as where are the weak points on that vehicle, what would need to be repaired, what needs to be replaced in order to get us as reliable as a vehicle as possible. Now, the Mitsubishi Monteros never really did great here sales-wise in the United States, but around the world, they sold a lot of Monteros. They are a very well-respected vehicle around the world, and in fact, the Mitsubishi Montero and Mitsubishi won the Paris to Dakar Rally, I think 12 years in a row. So a well-built, I've seen videos of Monteros with no lift, virtually no modifications, climbing up some of the steep rock faces at Moab even. So a very capable vehicle to start this out on. Was able to pick it up for what I believe is a good price of $6,000. So to get in under the $10,000 budget, that gives me $4,000 to do maintenance and get the vehicle up to a place where I feel that it is capable, fully capable of going off-road and getting us out of a situation and into some fun adventures. So right now, as we stand, I'll rattle really quickly through the things that I have done and the materials that I have purchased to keep you updated on what's going on with this. At some point here, I'm going to get this all written out and up on the website so people can follow along and see the choices that I've made. For the maintenance part of this, I have, as much as possible, tried not to skimp on parts. I have tried as much as possible to buy Mitsubishi parts, because if they have lasted for 140-some thousand miles in this vehicle already, I know that the chances of them lasting another 140,000 miles are good. Being a vehicle that's sold so much around the world, there are a lot of cheaper parts. But for the maintenance end of this, I'm really trying to, as much as possible, stick with OEM parts so that I don't have to dig back into things again or have breakdowns due to bad parts while I'm in the middle of an adventure. So far we've done plugs, wires, swapped out the fluids in the front differential, in the rear differential, in the transfer case, swapped out the coils, new bushings in the cross member that is at the transmission. There was a lot of vibrations there. Swapped out the serpentine belt. Both of the boots that are on the rack and pinion steering were tore, so I've replaced those to keep that dust and dirt and water out of my rack and pinion steering. And a freewheel clutch was one of the first things I did, just a small vacuum line piece that helps with, or that is a part of the transfer case. There's a weakness on this vehicle with on the intake plenum with the butterfly valve, so I removed those butterfly valves. We'll come up with a better solution in the future for maybe replacing the bushings on that, but for now I don't need to worry about that. I've also bought the parts now to replace a lot of the guts along with the timing belt and the water pump. Along with that, there's a new bolt that they got for the crankshaft. So all of these pieces for all the fluids so far, all of I purchased mats. Like I said, I had gaskets when I had to take apart the intake in order to get to the plugs and the wires and the coils and all the timing belt pieces, which I'm replacing as much as possible. There's some sensors in there. I went on the forums and said, hey, I'm digging into the timing belt. What should I replace? So there's a lot of different little seals and parts and pieces in there. Again, went with the Mitsubishi brand of tensioner on the timing belt because there's issues with the other brands. So again, trying to stick as much as possible to the best quality parts that we can during this maintenance phase. So my total right now is just under $1,000 for the maintenance parts that I've purchased so far. Next weekend, I will be getting into that timing belt, and that for me is digging a lot deeper into this this project than I've ever dug before on a vehicle. So I'm a little nervous about it, but at the same time excited to be doing something different. So the bulk, the majority of the maintenance work that I consider necessary maintenance work will be done on the vehicle for right around $1,000. There's a little bit of things that will probably still do just simple things like the steering fluid and the brake fluid and just some little things like that, PCV valve, those types of things that we'll replace depending on where we end up. A lot of that stuff will just get done anyway. It needs to get done. I will feel much more confident in the vehicle if that stuff's done. So as we start to get into suspension or lift, new tires, things of that nature, that is where I'm going to have to do some give and take and some compromises in order to keep this thing under our budget of $10,000. So as I move forward and make decisions on that, I'll keep you guys updated here on the podcast, as well as, like I said, I'll probably start up a page on Expedition Portal. You can check out that. It's a great resource with some very knowledgeable people on there that are very willing to share their knowledge and help you out. a lot of stuff on overlanding, whether you're in the United States or whether you're in a different country. Everything from Land Rovers to Isuzu Troopers to Mitsubishi Monteros, Tacomas, Forerunners, and everything in between. Very cool website, Expedition Portal. Check it out if you're interested in overlanding and what it is and what it can be for you and your family. Go look into it. So far for me, like I said, it has been a great creative project for me. And at the same time, given something for me to do with my son as we dig into the stuff and work on it, and things to do as a family as we go on different driving tours down here in Texas and just hit the dirt roads and some of these little river crossings and things like that. Having some family picnics at different stopping places along the rivers and stuff has just been a joy for me, and something that we'll continue doing as a family. So that's it for the update on the budget, PDL Budget Overland Project. As far as the book Open that I've been working on, no longer will be ever referred to as the open concept, because I don't believe it's a concept anymore. I believe that I've proven out the 6 principles of open: to open your mind, open your eyes, open your ears, open your mouth, open your heart, and open your arms. The book is, I would say, 99.9% done. I just got it back from the editor. He went through everything, added some stuff, tweaked some stuff, made sure things looked, or I should say, were written correctly and the right punctuation was in the right spot. I'm going to go over it once more myself and just make sure that I feel that things flow the way that I want them to, or as well as I possibly can. I'm going to be very careful not to dig too deep, to just stay on the surface level and just make any changes that I think need to be made. And then it will go to somebody to help me format it for Kindle so that we can get it out on Amazon and be able to print it out. And at the same time, I will be getting it formatted for PDF so that it looks nice and looks good in PDF form. So especially so that those of you who hit me up at the end of last year and you said, you know what, when that's available, I want a copy of it, so that when I send you that PDF, that digital copy of the book, that it will look good and that it'll be easy to read and easy to follow along with. I believe I've kept it as simple as possible. That's one thing on this podcast. I always want to simplify things. We live in a world of chaos. We live in a world filled with confusion and diversion and entertainment and distractions. It's very hard to read through a long book. It's very hard to keep from getting distracted. So this book is short. It's sweet. It's to the point. I believe I got good family stories to illustrate the points that I'm trying to get across. And at the end of each chapter has some action points so that you can start to move forward and progress in that area. So I'm excited to get it out. And I believe, and I put in the effort and the energy and the time to get this book out, because I believe, just like it did for me, that it can help set some of you guys on a different path, help you down a different trajectory towards becoming the husband and the father and the leader that you can be, that you want to be, but just are having difficulties knowing where to start and how to look at things. And each and every one of these things in this book is not just something that I decided to write about, but it is something that I have experimented with and experienced and lived out and believed to be true, and have proven out in my own life to be true. So I'm excited to get that book out there to you guys, and to really, at the same time, I'm excited because this has been a goal, this has been an idea, this has been a thought and this book has been in development, whether in my mind or on the podcast or on paper in the computer, for a very, very, very long time, probably at least 4 years. So to be able to get it out and get it done and mark that kind of off of my list for this year, my goal is to have it completely out and done by the end of the first quarter of this year. So I will let you guys know as soon as it's out and it's available, so that you guys can give it a read and let me know what you think and give me some realistic feedback. And maybe at some point we'll have to do an edit on it if I wasn't clear enough in some of the areas, or there's some questions on different things that I'm talking about. So with that, as always, thank you for listening. I appreciate those of you guys who have left reviews for this podcast, those of you who have shared this podcast, those of you who leave comments on Instagram or direct message me on Instagram to let me know that the podcast has been worth your while and that you're getting something out of it that keeps this thing going. So you can follow me on Instagram at Prepare.Defend.Lead. I also do a daily between 2 and 10 minute, just either what I've been learning, something that I learned that day, something I've been thinking about that day, or something that I've done that day. Just a quick hit gives me an opportunity to work on my communication skills, gives me an opportunity to share something I've been thinking about, and hopefully, for those that listen, it gives them something to think about. And that's my whole goal for that. So that's PDL Raw Daily on Instagram. You can follow me there. It's a great place to keep up to date on what's going on with the Homestead, what's going on with the Overland Project, and what's going on right here with this podcast. Again, thanks for listening, and as always, hold fast and God bless.